It's Medicaid, Medicare, and obviously Social Security are the big outlays.
When you lose that job, you've lost your health care. Yeah. What else can you rely on?
This bill would take health insurance away from 8 million people.
Let's hop into a CNN panel discussing some more of the reporting we now have on the tax plan that MAGA is hoping to push through Congress. So if you can, first leave us a like. We really appreciate it. It helps the video get boosted in the algorithm. And let's hop right into the discussion.
They can save some money by adding work requirements to Medicaid. And I think there's a view out there in the country that maybe a lot of people are not working and getting Medicaid, and that's not popular. Actually, that's not really true. About 70 million Americans are covered by Medicaid. And according to the CBO, at least, by 2034, this bill would take health insurance away from 8 million people. So you can see from the math there that maybe 10% of the people currently covered by Medicaid are working age adults who are not in work. So the amount of money saved by adding work requirements is actually relatively small. And that's the theory, but then in practice, there's a kind of real world experiment, because the state of Arkansas put work requirements on Medicaid a couple of years ago, did this experiment. And what they found actually is the employment rate didn't go up much, but quite a few people lost their health care.
Yep, exactly. And what it actually does is subject the poorest, most vulnerable of Americans to even more cruel workplace conditions. As if they were to speak up and be fired or quit because of bad working conditions, they would then also lose their health care. It also punishes those searching for jobs but unable to find one, just giving owners even more power over the most vulnerable of Americans, which these corporate shills love to do. There is even, there's those who may lose their job because of sickness, right, or injury, and they need services or equipment that they can only afford through Medicaid to assist them in getting back to work, as mundane as like a cane to more serious like heart rate monitors, oxygen tanks even. Then they're both left without both equipment or the healthcare that they need due to a restriction that has minimal, if any, effects on employment and moves us away from the correct conclusion of every other developed country in which healthcare is a human right.
It's Medicaid, Medicare, and obviously Social Security are the big outlays. It's close to $1 trillion in Medicaid, about $900 billion, I think, right now, for about 72 million people, as was just said. It really shows the failure of Obamacare. And Obamacare is so expensive. A family has to pay about $24,000 to be covered under Obamacare. You can't afford it. So all this thing about Obama was going to solve the healthcare problem, everybody's moved over to Medicaid. It's moving towards socialized medicine for the entire country. That's the problem, and that's what they're trying to figure out how to fix. And when you have working age males that are, on Medicaid, that's a real problem when you have 4% unemployment. So we have a pretty full employment economy. Wages are not as high as they need to be. A lot of that has to do with immigration problems and outsourcing of jobs. So there's a whole gamut of issues around this. But when you have that many people that can work and pay, there needs to be something that needs to be done on the healthcare cost side of things. And that's a really hard problem to tackle.
So you kick people off Medicaid first and then you figure out the rest later? I mean, I think that's the issue.
Right. And remember, guys, after 8 years of Trump, he still only has concepts of a plan and admitted as such himself. But this dude said a litany of just blatantly untrue things. So let me do the fact check. First, the average Obamacare family plan is less than $1,000 a year, though I would agree. I mean, even that is too expensive. Healthcare should be tax-based and free out of pocket. It's far lower, though, than what this man is claiming. 40% of Obamacare recipients pay $10 or less a month. Over 90% receive subsidies and discounts. When I had Obamacare insurance, I was paying like $24 a month. There's been major studies, over 30 years of data, that shows that socialized single-payer healthcare would save money both on the health insurance side and the medicine costs. So why would that be the problem if we're heading in that direction? It clearly wouldn't be. I mean, we aren't, but by all economic metrics, we should be, and morally, we obviously should be as well.
What about the job seekers? What about the people who are looking for work? As you mentioned, we're in a near full employment economy right now. Wisconsin has had historically high employment for the last several years now. So there are people who still are in need of healthcare but cannot find a job. The unfortunate reality is that with healthcare being tied to a person's employment, when you lose that job, you've lost your healthcare. Yeah. What else can you rely on?
The whole system's broken.
Well, the whole system. And I have been a long proponent of universal healthcare system, which would solve all of our problems, to be quite honest. And I don't know a whole bunch of arguments against it. If you look at the amount of money that people would be saving, consumers, that would ultimately be bankrolled by raising taxes on the wealthy, as you mentioned. Thank you for that point. And what Josh Hawley also has advocated for.
Well, raising taxes on the wealthy isn't going to pay for any of this type of thing. I mean, there's just not enough wealthy people to pay for everything.
There absolutely is. Again, universal healthcare is actually cheaper than what our current model is. It's easier to fund one big pool than 1,000 tiny ones. So the idea we would need more funding is fallacious in and of itself. But as to the point of not having enough taxes to fund things, we could create an estimated $650 billion in revenue each year alone from a 0.5% tax on Wall Street transactions. That is half of 1%. We could tax banks and their large assets 0.15%. That would generate over $100 billion a year. We could tax carbon emissions by $50 to $100 a ton. That is like 10%, maybe less than that. And that would bring in $200 to $400 billion a year. We could tax the foreign exchange market by 0.1% and bring in $300 billion. I mean, we're not even talking serious taxes or a percent anyone would notice here. And most of those, it was less than 1%. And I've gotten like $1.4 trillion in additional revenue ready to go each year just from that. Now, if we wanted to be real socialist commies here, we could do a wealth tax. We could do a tax on luxury goods. We could bring the top marginal tax rate back to when we saw the most economic growth in this country. And we're easily talking about another trillion and some dollars in revenue, maybe 3 trillion total, all without touching the middle class or even affecting the livelihood of the wealthy in the amount of taxation we're putting on them. And all of a sudden, we can now afford things like universal health care to end homelessness, like food stamps for all or a WIC for all type program, guaranteed childcare, free education, K through 12 and higher with guaranteed meals in each, with money left over to put towards our debt. But I'm just a dumb commie, so what do I know?